Okay, let's dive right into this really fascinating place where law, politics, and your actual everyday life all collide. We're going to talk about what happens when the courts have to step in and make the kinds of decisions that, governments are supposed to make. Welcome to the world of judicialization in Brazil. And to really get this, let's make it personal for a second. Just imagine that you, or maybe someone you love, needs a specific, super expensive medicine to survive. But the public health system says, nope, sorry, it's not on our approved list. What do you do? Where do you turn? Well, for thousands and thousands of Brazilians, the answer is to take that exact problem to the one place that has to listen, the courtroom. And that one simple act, that's the very heart of what we're talking about today. So, simply put, judicialization is just this process of moving big political decisions into the legal world. When a judge orders the government to provide that specific medicine we talked about, that is a perfect textbook example. The judge is directly intervening in health policy, forcing the government to do something it had decided not to do. Now, it's really important here to separate this from a term you've probably heard a lot, judicial activism. People mix these up all the time, but they are not the same thing. Judicialization is a phenomenon. It happens because the system itself allows it. Activism, on the other hand, is a choice. It's a posture that a judge takes to proactively stretch the meaning of a law to create something new. I love this analogy because it makes the difference crystal clear. The system opens the door for the courts to hear these cases. That's judicialization. But when a judge walks through that door and decides to completely reshape the policy, going way beyond the one case in front of them, well, that's when you start hearing talk about activism. So you might be wondering, why is this such a huge deal in Brazil specifically? Well, it's not some accident. It's really the result of a perfect storm of factors that all came together to create this very unique environment. It all builds in three key steps. First, you've got the 1988 Constitution. This thing is incredibly ambitious. It basically turned broad political promises into actual, legally enforceable rights. Second, you have government inaction. When the other branches of government don't deliver on those promises, they leave a huge power vacuum. And third, that same Constitution seriously strengthened the justice system, especially the public prosecutor's office, giving it powerful tools to step right into that vacuum and demand results. And this, of course, leads to a massive debate. Is this a good thing, or is it a really bad thing? As you can probably imagine, there are very strong arguments on both sides. On the one hand, supporters say this is democracy in action. It's how you guarantee fundamental rights for regular people, protect minorities, and force a lazy government to do its job. But on the other hand, critics raise some really serious red flags. They warn about a government of judges who, remember, nobody elected. They argue that judges aren't experts in public health or economics, and their decisions can cause total chaos for public budgets. And here's a really sharp counterargument. Some experts call it the Robin Hood in reverse effect. The idea is that judicialization often ends up helping people who have the money and know how to hire a lawyer. They get these incredibly expensive treatments. But that money has to come from somewhere, right? And often it's taken from basic public health programs like sanitation or vaccines that would have helped a much, much larger group of poorer people. So how do judges justify making these huge calls? Well, they often rely on this legal tug-of-war between two big ideas. The first is what's called the existential minimum, the idea that the Constitution says the state must provide a core set of rights for people to live a dignified life. The government then pushes back with their own argument, the reserve of the possible, basically saying, hey, our resources are limited. But here's the crucial part. Brazilian courts have consistently ruled that providing that existential minimum is an absolute priority that trumps any budgetary excuses. But wait, the story doesn't actually end there. It's not just about one person suing the government and getting what they need. There's a really surprising twist that shows how this whole process can feed back into the system itself. Think about it for a second. A single lawsuit might seem pretty small, but it can act like a catalyst. It can send a massive signal to the government that forces a much bigger system-wide change in how they do things. Researchers actually call this the judicialized policy cycle. Let's just walk through the 5 steps. 1, a policy fails for a person. 2, that person sues. 3, a court steps in and orders a fix, but just for that one individual. 4, the government has to react. But here's the key part, step 5. To avoid dealing with thousands of more lawsuits just like it, the government takes that one ruling and turns it into a new, broader policy for everybody. The cycle comes full circle. This whole process creates something called indirect external effects. Basically, a court victory for one person who could afford to sue can trigger this expansive compliance, which ends up creating a new policy that helps tons of other people who never even stepped foot in a courtroom. It's a way the judiciary can actually make the whole system more responsive. So, after all that, where does this leave us? Well, we have a system that was born from a constitution just filled with promises, where the courts have become these central, powerful players in making sure those promises are kept. And ultimately, it forces us all to ask a really fundamental question about what the courts should be doing in a democracy. Are they the essential guardians of our rights, our last line of defense? Or are they slowly becoming a government of judges, unelected rulers making political choices without any democratic permission? The answer, as we've seen, is incredibly complicated, and it really sits at the very heart of Brazilian democracy today.